Hello, boys and girls. So, we are starting a new chapter in Little House in the Big Woods. And this chapter is called Going to Town. So, before we start this chapter, you have to realize that they lived in the middle of the woods. They have always lived in the middle of the woods. And so, they have never, if you were Laura, you had never been to a town. They had never seen other houses. They had never seen a store. I mean, it's really hard for me to imagine that, to have lived someplace where you never see another house. All you see is your own house and some trees. They had never been to a store. They had never seen anything other than just the trees that were in their neighborhood and their own house because they were so isolated in the woods. Literally, they were a little house in the big woods. And so that was all they knew. So they are going to go see a town, and it is going to blow their minds, Laura and Mary, because they've never seen a town before. They've never seen a school. They've never seen a whole bunch of houses next door to each other. They're going to see a lake, and they've never seen a lake before, and they're going to see sand. So it's going to be so exciting for them because they're just used to their own little world, their own little bubble, right? After the sugar snow had gone, spring came. Birds sang in the leafing hazel bushes along the crooked rail fence. The grass grew green again, and the woods were full of wild flowers. Buttercups and violets, thimble flowers, and tiny starry grass flowers were everywhere. As soon as the days were warm, Laura and Mary begged to be allowed to run barefoot. At first, they might only run out around the woodpile and back in their bare feet. Next day, they could run farther, and soon their shoes were oiled and put away, and they ran barefoot all day long. Every night, they had to wash their feet before they went to bed. Under the hems of their skirts, their ankles and their feet were as brown as their faces. They had playhouses under the two big oak trees in front of the house. Mary's playhouse was under Mary's tree, and Laura's playhouse was under Laura's tree. The soft grass made a green carpet for them. The green leaves were the roofs, and through them they could see bits of the blue sky. Pa made a swing of tough bark and hung it to a large low branch of Laura's tree. It was her swing because it was in her tree, but she had to be unselfish and let Mary swing in it whenever she wanted to. Mary had a cracked saucer to play with, and Laura had a beautiful cup with only one big piece broken out of it. Charlotte and Nettie, the two little wooden men Pa had made, lived in the playhouse with them. Every day, they made fresh leaf hats for Charlotte and Nettie, and they made little leaf cups and saucers to set on their table. The table was a nice smooth rock. Suki and Rosie the cows were turned loose in the woods now to eat the wild grass and the juicy new leaves. There were 2 little calves in the barnyard and 7 little pigs with the mother hog in the pig pen. In the clearing he had made last year, Pa was plowing around the stumps and putting on in his crops. One night he came in from work and said to Laura, "What do you think I saw today?" She couldn't guess. "Well," Pa said, "when I was working in the clearing this morning, I looked up and there at the edge of the woods stood a deer. She was a doe, a mother deer, and you'll never guess what was with her." "A baby deer," Laura and Mary guessed together, clasping their hands. "Yes," Pa said, "her fawn was with her. It was a pretty little thing, the softest fawn color with big dark eyes. It had the tiniest feet, not much bigger than my thumb, and it had slender little legs and the softest muzzle. It stood there and looked at me with its large soft eyes, wondering what I was. It was not afraid at all." "You wouldn't shoot a little baby deer, would you, Pa?" Laura said. "No, never," he answered. "Nor its ma, nor its pa. No more hunting now till all the little wild animals have grown up. We'll just have to do without fresh meat till fall." Pa said that as soon as he had the crops in, they would all go to town. Laura and Mary would go too. They were old enough now. Here's a little picture of them in their swing, their tree. Mary's pushing Laura. They were very much excited, and next day they tried to play going to town. They could not do it very well because they were not quite sure what a town was like. That's so funny. They're trying to play Going to Town, but they've never been to a town, so they don't know how to play it. But they knew there was a store in town, but they had never seen a store. Nearly every day after that, Charlotte and Nettie would ask if they could go to town, but Laura and Mary always said, "No, dear, you can't go this year. Perhaps next year. If you are good, then you can go." So they're telling their dolls that. You can't go to town, but maybe next year. Then one night Pa said, "We'll go to town tomorrow." That night, though it was the middle of the week, Ma bathed Laura and Mary all over, and she put up their hair. She divided their long hair into wisps, combed each wisp with a wet comb, and wound it tightly on a bit of rag. There were knobby little bumps all over their heads, whichever way they turned on their pillows. In the morning, their hair would be curly. My mom used to do that with my hair, too. She would section off little pieces, and then she'd roll it up, and then she'd put a little hairpin in it. Sometimes you could tie, my hairs can tie into knots when it's long. You can tie it into little knots, and then it makes your hair really curly. But then you can't sleep on it. It's really hard to sleep because you have little bumps of hair. You have little knots all over your head. In the morning, their hair would be curly. They were so excited that they did not go to sleep at once. Ma was not sitting with her mending basket as usual. She was busy getting everything ready for a quick breakfast and laying out the best stockings and petticoats and dresses, and Pa's good shirt, and her own dark brown calico with the little purple flowers on it. The days were longer now. In the morning, Ma blew out the lamp before they finished breakfast. It was a beautiful, clear spring morning. Ma hurried Laura and Mary with their breakfast, and she washed the dishes quickly. They put on their stockings and shoes while she made the beds. Then she helped them put on their best dresses, Mary's china blue calico and Laura's dark red calico. Mary buttoned Laura up the back, and then Ma buttoned Mary. Ma took the rags off their hair and combed it into long, round curls that hung down over their shoulders. She combed so fast that the snarls hurt dreadfully. Mary's hair was beautifully golden, but Laura's was only a dirt-colored brown. When their curls were done, Ma tied their sunbonnets under their chins. She fastened her collar with the gold pin, and she was putting on her hat when Pa drove up to the gate. He had curried the horses till they shone. He had swept the wagon box clean and laid a clean blanket on the wagon seat. Ma, with baby Carrie in her arms, sat up on the wagon seat with Pa, and Laura and Mary sat on a board fastened across the wagon box behind the seat. They were happy as they drove through the springtime woods. Carrie laughed and bounced. Ma was smiling, and Pa whistled while he drove the horses. The sun was bright and warm on the road. Sweet, cool smells came out of the leafy woods. Rabbits stood up in the road ahead, their little front paws dangling down and their noses sniffing, and the sun shone through their tall, twitching ears. Then they bounced away with a flash of little white tail. Twice Laura and Mary saw deer looking at them with their large dark eyes from the shadows among the trees. It was 7 miles to town. The town was named Pepin, and it was on the shore of Lake Pepin. After a long time, Laura began to see glimpses of blue water between the trees. The hard road turned to soft sand. The wagon wheels went deep down in it, and the horses pulled and sweated. Often Pa stopped them to rest for a few minutes. Then all at once the road came out of the woods, and Laura saw the lake. It was as blue as the sky, and it went to the edge of the world. As far as she could see, there was nothing but flat blue water. Very far away, and sky and the water met, and there was a darker blue line. So here's what it looks like. You can see their wagon down below. Their dog is following behind, right down here, down below the wagon. You can see that their wheels are pretty deep in the sand. In order for them to sit down, Pa has just fastened a board along the back of the wagon to give them a back seat, right? And then they're going to fill the wagon with things that they buy at the store. And so they have to leave the back sort of open so that they can fill it, right? Down here at the bottom of the wagon, sometimes they kept water down at the bottom of the wagon. And sometimes they kept oil down at the bottom of the wagon because you might need to oil the axles of your wagon, right? So down here hanging, you might either have a water bucket or you might have a little container with oil on it. So this is what the town looks like. All right. I'm going to read a couple more pages and then I will stop. The sky was large overhead. Laura had never known that the sky was that big. There was so much empty space all around her that she felt small and frightened and glad that Pa and Ma were there. Because remember, she has been in a forest with trees everywhere. So now they're in an area where there are no trees and you can see the sky. And it's probably kind of terrifying because she has never seen that much sky before. So she's feeling a little overwhelmed because she's out of the forest. Suddenly, the sunshine was hot. The sun was almost overhead in the large empty sky, and the cool woods stood back from the edge of the lake. Even the big woods seemed smaller under so much sky. Pa stopped the horses and turned around on the wagon seat. He pointed ahead with his whip. "There you are, Laura and Mary," he said. "There's the town of Papan." Laura stood up on the board, and Pa held her safe by the arm so she could see the town. When she saw it, she could hardly breathe. She knew how Yankee Doodle felt when he could not see the town because there were so many houses. Right on the edge of the lake, there was one great big building. That was the store, Pa told her. It was not made of logs. It was made of wide gray boards running up and down, the sand spread all around it. Behind the store there was a clearing, larger than Pa's clearing in the woods at home. Standing among the stumps there were more houses than Laura could count. They were not made of logs either. They were made of boards like the store. Laura had never imagined so many houses, and they were so close together. Of course, they were much smaller than the store. One of them was made of new boards that had not had time to get gray. It was the yellow color of newly cut wood. People were living in all these houses. Smoke rose up from their chimneys. Though it was not Monday, some woman had spread out a washing on the bushes and stumps by her house. Several girls and boys were playing in the sunshine in the open space between the store and the little houses. They were jumping from one stump to the next stump and shouting. "Well, that's Papan," Pa said. Laura just nodded her head. She looked and could not say a word. After a while she sat down again, and the horses went on. They left the wagon on the shore of the lake. Pa unhitched the horses and tied one to each side of the wagon box. Then he took Laura and Mary by the hand, and Ma came beside them carrying baby Carrie. They walked through the deep sand to the store. The warm sand came in over the tops of Laura's shoes. There was a wide platform in front of the store, and at one end of it, steps went up to it out of the sand. Laura's heart was beating so fast that she could hardly climb the steps. She was trembling all over. This was the store to which Pa came to trade his furs. When they went in, the storekeeper knew him. The storekeeper came out from behind the counter and spoke to him and to Ma, and then Laura and Mary had to show their manners. So we're going to stop right there in the middle of their visit to the store because I don't want the camera to freeze again. So I'll film the next one in a couple of seconds. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. We are in the town of Papan, and we're going to visit the store, and then we're going to have a little incident with Laura, a little incident and accident, and then they're going to head home. So I hope you enjoyed listening to Little House in the Big Woods, and I will talk to you later. Jeffy. Yeah.